Oh, I should say I'm Ian Petrie, and I work at the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I also teach in South Asian Studies and History and Sociology of Science. All right, first, a warning. Teaching demos are always weird. It's always going to feel somewhat artificial, and it's super hard to be yourself and teach as you would normally teach. But the goal is to try to get as close to that as you can, even given the artificiality or worse of the situation. I would say that in general, teaching demos are uh, most likely to take place the more teaching intensive the institution or the more teaching focused the position, the more likely it is that you're going to have to do a teaching demo. However, having said that, just last spring, somebody who was a finalist for a job at University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is obviously a high-powered elite research institution, they had to do both a traditional job talk and a teaching demo. I've even heard of some departments at Harvard asking for teaching demos. So you might imagine a two-day campus visit where on day one you do your job talk, day two you do a teaching demo, something like that. What you can also find is that you don't actually get asked to do a research talk or a traditional job talk, and the teaching demo is the only performance of the campus visit. And that is much more likely to happen at more teaching intensive institutions where, practically speaking, your research bona fides are already established by your track record, and it's really seeing you work with students that is the key thing in thinking about making a hire. You could also find yourself being asked to do more than one teaching demo. I've only encountered this where the person was going for a position where there was no research expectation at all. It was a straight teaching track job. And she was asked, this was a person in a STEM field, she was asked to do 20 minutes in a large lecture class and 20 minutes in a small seminar class. They wanted to see how she worked in both of those teaching situations. And lastly, and this one is sort of the weirdest, I would say, I've worked with a couple of folks who were asked to not do a teaching demonstration per se, but to do a presentation about how they think about teaching. And so these are all things that you might encounter. And I will say these are all things that my colleagues and I at CTL would be happy to work with you on, because most departments at Penn, when they are hiring, don't ask for teaching demonstrations. Most of our faculty, or many of our faculty, were never asked to do a teaching demonstration when they were on the job market. So it's very common for a department to say to its folks who are on the market, we will convene a job talk for you. You can practice your job talk in the department, but we don't know anything about teaching demonstrations. And that's where my colleagues and I can step in to fill that gap and help you work on this so that you are feeling confident both about your job talk and about one or more teaching demonstrations that you might do. Couple of more nuances on terms of what you might expect. In some cases, the 4 job candidates, the 4 finalists, are slotted into 4 days in Professor Jones's class. Professor Jones gives up 4 days in her class, and the job candidate does whatever the topic on the syllabus was going to be, so that you are parachuting into someone's class and you are also told what the topic you're supposed to teach on. Another version of that is parachuting into someone's class, but they let you pick. And in some cases, they might also say, select a short reading that we will give to the students and hope that they will do that preparation. I've worked with someone where that was the case. And in my experience, if you are given freedom to choose a topic, I think it's a collegial and probably strategic thing to do to try to have a little dialogue with the instructor to sort of figure out something, not to put it this baldly, but you want something that's going to work for you but you also want something that's going to fit in with their class, because this is, giving up 4 classes is disruptive. And I think you can actually have some nice collegial conversation with somebody about how your teaching demo will fit in with their class, and you'll have a chance to learn a bit more about their class, which will make it easier for you to teach those students effectively. Sometimes what they'll have is you're not in a real class at all. They muster a group of students, they reach out to the biology club or whatever, and they try to get, 15 or 20 students to come out, and they function as your class. One version of this that I've encountered is that in order to try to have a comparison between the finalists, the same topic is assigned to each person. And so they are told, this was a biologist I had in mind. And I will say, so far, all the examples that I've invoked, those people were successful. They got the job that they did this demo for. So sometimes they may say, everybody's going to teach the same topic to this audience that we've assembled. And another version of this is that there aren't actually any students there at all, and you just have the committee and some other faculty members there pretending to be students or not pretending to be students, as the case may be. An acquaintance of mine did a teaching demo. It was just a faculty. She had planned an interactive lesson, and numbers of the faculty refused to do the activity. That was one of a number of signs on that campus visit that persuaded her that she did not, in fact, want this job. So again, I don't want to deny that there can be awkward things that happen in these events. All right, so how are you going to go in there and have a successful outcome? One thing I would say is that the artificiality of the situation, the fact that you don't know the students, might lead you to default to doing a straight lecture, right? To give you control, the most control over what happens. And I think that unless you are given instructions that says we want a straight 50-minute lecture and 10 minutes for questions, I would strongly encourage you to always try to figure out a way to get some interaction between you and the students and some student-to-student interaction, because I really think that most places are going to be looking for this. And the more teaching intensive the institution, or the smaller the class sizes at the institution, this is going to be really important. This is a little bit weird. This is an anecdote from the experience of my former dentist's wife, who was a social scientist. And you don't normally get feedback on these things, but she had a campus visit at a place like Williams. I'm not sure it was Williams, but an elite liberal arts college. And she did a straight up lecture for her teaching demo. And she was actually told by the search chair that that choice was one of the reasons why they didn't offer her the job. The good news is she has a job at a research university. Everything ended up fine. But it's relatively rare that people get feedback, but I thought that was really interesting. And so again, and this is the kind of thing we can help you try to figure out, is how are you going to walk into a room where you don't know the students, they don't know you, they might not trust you. How are you going to get some interaction? I would say most of the time, the attitude of the faculty, if you're guest teaching in their class, is not to withhold information because that's part of the test. I think most of the time people are going to be open with sharing their syllabus, letting you know how the class has been going. And you definitely want to figure out, how are you, as much as you can about the room and how you're going to be able to work effectively in that. Is it an active learning space? Is it a traditional kind of lecture setup? How can you try to turn the physical context of the room to your advantage? True story. Now, I'm a dinosaur, and this was a lifetime ago, but I once rolled into a job talk at a school, which I will not name, and said, can I fire up my PowerPoint? And they said, no, you can't. There's no projector in here. But fortunately, I had made overhead transparencies, and there was an overhead projector. So again, you want to figure out as much as you can ahead of time so that you don't have an oopsie like that. I see there's something in the chat, and I'll promise I'll get to you in just a second. Another piece of advice, most academic jobs prize breadth and teaching range. The vast majority of positions um, may not even ever let you teach in your particular area of specialization. You're always going to be teaching more broadly. And so I think where possible, you want to use a teaching demo to highlight your range, right? So an example from a Penn faculty member from a interview she had at another institution was that she's a medievalist and her teaching demo was on the 19th century because she wanted to show that she could teach um, Chinese history across a broad range. Similarly, my research was on 19th century India. One of my teaching demos was about the Mughal Empire um, and using um, paintings as the source of the talk, which is not what I work on in my research. And so I think that is one way that you can be strategic, even if it puts you a little bit out of your comfort zone. And you do want to try and find something that is, that you preferably have taught before, maybe in the context of a TA-ship. You want to go with your strengths, even while stretching a bit. I think it's great. And again, this goes back to getting information, but I think it would be great to walk into that teaching demo and be able to say to the students, right, remember 2 weeks ago when Professor Jones was telling you about X or Y? Well, what I'm going to show you today connects to that in an interesting way, right? You want to sort of show the students that you've taken the time and care to figure out how to situate your lesson in that larger course that they're taking. I think this is just general good practice in giving a guest lecture, even outside the context of a job interview. Again, just showing that you took the time to figure out where they're at and ways that you could kind of activate things that they had already learned and connect it to your lesson. I would say in general, a job interview is not a time to experiment with that cool ed tech that you've heard of. If you haven't been a user of Poll Everywhere or Kahoot or something like that, this is probably not the time to try that out, and sort of minimizing the number of things that could possibly go awry is probably the smart play. I would say if you are teaching in a smaller group, I would pick up some paper name tents and try to start using students' names. Again, if I were observing someone teach, that would impress me in terms of their trying to overcome the obstacle of being a complete stranger to the people in the room. I think it's a pretty easy thing to do, and it's a good idea. This is maybe a little specific, but it is something that I've seen people do. Is you're flying out to somewhere in the Midwest. Is there a local angle that could inflect your lesson? This might not be true if you're a chemist, but I have seen people who were sort of ecologists make reference to something in the local landscape, in particular, and building their lesson around that, or picking a piece of art that's in a local collection as one of your examples. Again, I think if you were to get that job, you might be regularly thinking about ways in which to inflect things locally. But I think even doing that for the campus visit, it shows that you care. It shows that you're thinking about where you're speaking and what things might be known and be of interest to the folks in the room. Again, if I haven't alienated you today, come and talk to us when you get the invite. I will say that sometimes some committees are better organized than others in terms of giving you the information. Sometimes it might be relatively late in the day relative to when you're supposed to fly out that you actually get the agenda and find out what you're supposed to do. Again, because most departments don't really have the wherewithal or the inclination to host practice teaching demonstrations. We do a lot of this. We enjoy it. And I think it's constructive for candidates. So you can come to our space to practice your demo, bring your people. Bring, some of your faculty if they're available, bring some of your peers, and we'll help you practice and get the timing right and feel confident for when you go to whatever campus it is the following week. All right. That the end of the talking at you with slides.